The median price of a single-family home in San Francisco in spring/summer 2026 was around $1.9 million. The sticker price to a home in San Francisco is only the beginning. In this video, I'm going to walk through property types in the San Francisco Bay Area that can turn your dream home into a financial nightmare if you do not do your due diligence before you purchase the property. Katie Pratt, I'm a realtor in the San Francisco Bay Area. Hit the subscribe button if you are more interested in San Francisco lifestyle and real estate videos. And really quickly, before I get into the 6 home types, I'd like to note some of the natural hazards that I've mentioned in other videos, which are in the natural hazard disclosure reports that you don't deal with in other cities in the United States. So the Bay Area is unique in the sense that we are close to fault zones, several fault zones, and the due date for seismic activity on the Richter scale of a 7.0 earthquake is probable in the next 10 to 15 years. These older buildings have specific seismic retrofit requirements depending on their size and age. On that note, the second is the building stock. There isn't a ton of new construction, whether it be because of NIMBYism, available space, the desire to preserve historic buildings. We have tons of Victorian, Edwardian homes that are older than 100 years old. With that come higher maintenance costs. Another risk is the flood risk. This is not true for all of San Francisco. There are specific flood zones, stormwater flooding, and coastal flood zones. And lastly, there's ownership complexity. Because of rent control and condo conversion restrictions, you'll find more TICs in San Francisco probably than any other city in the country. So property type number 1 is any property that is in a high flood risk zone. That's what the city calls the 100-year storm flood risk zone. That includes portions of Mission Bay, Soma, some waterfront areas, and sections near Islas Creek. While the city updated its maps in December 2024, if you buy in one of these zones, here's what to expect. First is flood insurance. So typically, just like if you were in a high fire severity zone, this is going to cost you more money. Flood insurance in these areas could cost you anywhere between $2,000 and $4,000 for a single family home per year. And that's on top of your regular insurance premium. And just like other insurance requirements for other natural hazards, even if the risk is actually lower, or maybe you're just outside of a flood zone, it's possible that an insurance provider could consider it separately a high risk. So despite what the natural hazard disclosure report says, the insurer might have their own classification system in which they deem flood insurance necessary. And second, there's a financing impact. There is, because all lenders require insurance, so you can't get the loan without the insurance. Some lenders might not approve loans in these flood zones. Others might require additional documentation, preventative measures of a building if it's a condo association, so that their loan to value is lower, meaning that in their eyes, their risk is less. So on the resale side, remember that this might lower the pool of potential buyers who can purchase your unit or single family home. If you're able to get an elevation certificate, you could prove that if your property is within the storm flood zone, technically it sits above the high flood risk level. Of course, if you have the option, in almost every flood prone neighborhood, there are properties that are on the same street, maybe down the block, that sit just outside of that high flood risk zone, and they don't have the flood insurance requirement. Or, if you're really serious about a property within the high flood risk zone, look for, of course, water intrusion preventative methods or mitigation strategies. Sump pumps, French drains, slight increased grade next to the siding or any sensitive structures, maybe re-stuccoing the lower level instead of having it be wood siding. Next up, house type number 2, houses with foundation or seismic issues. So some of those Edwardian Victorian homes that I've mentioned before, their foundations were at one point in history brick foundations, which might have only been capped with concrete over the years and or not properly seismically retrofitted. So you see these homes throughout San Francisco, but they're very common in Pac Heights, Lower Haight, the Castro, Noe Valley, the Mission. So if you are considering just retrofitting the home, let's say that the brick foundation was capped and that's given a thumbs up by the structural engineer, the retrofitting, which could involve bracing and bolting the capped foundation to the framing of the house, can cost you anywhere from 10 to 20 grand. Settlement of a structure into the soil is common throughout the Bay Area. Various degrees of settlement might have happened a long time ago when the house was first built, so that's not necessarily what you're looking for in a home inspection report. If there's very noticeable sloping in the house, or there's something in the home inspection report that calls out abnormal amount of rotation in a corner of the house or cracking in the foundation, cracking is common in concrete capped foundations or concrete foundations on these structures. But if the home inspection says something along the lines of definitely recommend further inspection by a structural engineer, then you also want to look for that structural engineering report or make that part of your due diligence as the buyer to pay for a verbal walkthrough, which can be less expensive, before you put in the offer. Or if the seller is open to contingent offers, having an inspection contingency specifically for that quote. You want to look for someone who is a structural engineer, not just a contractor. And the 3R report should note any pulled permits in the past, specifically to address this. Doesn't mean there was always work that was done through city building and planning. So the seller could have their own records of, especially if it hasn't been on the market in a long time, their own records of what work has been done to the house specifically related to the foundation. Keep in mind too, like foundation replacement is much more expensive, especially in a complex hillside situation. Perhaps excavation is needed to secure the foundation when these homes are on zero lot lines, disturbing the foundation of one structure could disturb the foundation of another structure. So there's additional review by the city that has to be completed in that scenario. Sometimes, however, if you're able to stomach this type of work, let's say the seller does provide a structural engineering report with estimates for the cost of replacement of the foundation, that can be actually a deal for you. It's definitely your time, and your time is worth something, but having to address those issues on your own might result in a better acquisition price than what you would get with a home that has had a seismic retrofit completed. While it's rare to find newer construction, maybe you can find newer construction in San Francisco where the facades of the homes or the rebuilt character is like that of these Edwardian Victorian homes that you love.
If you are considering moving to the Bay Area and you're not sure what part of the Bay is right for you, check out our relocation guide below and our relocation quiz. In that, you'll find questions that will help you determine what part of the Bay would be best for you based on where you're working, your willingness to commute and use public transportation, type of weather you like, and your cost of living.
House type number 3, these are buildings that require soft story retrofits, especially because of the size of the buildings for which this is relevant, might not be on everyone's radar. So soft story buildings are typically wood frame structures that have a large opening, like a giant garage on the ground floor. So this would be condos or apartments built over a garage level or basement level. This would be a mixed use commercial building. So something that is a couple of residential units on top and commercial ground floor space on the bottom, which is a really special acquisition type that could be a deal. It depends on what your goals are in acquiring a property in San Francisco. So in short, like, this doesn't apply to most first-time home buyers. Generally, people who are considering 5 or more units, which would be a multifamily commercial building, which requires a whole different set of financing. Actually, another consideration would be if you are looking at a tenancy in common building, 5-unit building that's been converted into a tenancy in common building, and a building that was built before 1978. So the requirements are the following: built before 1978, have 2 or more stories above an open space, garage, commercial space, open retail space on the bottom floor, have 5 or more units. That said, when, let's say you're a TIC buyer or a condo buyer, when doing your due diligence, you want to make sure that the retrofit was completed at the time that tenancy in common was established, or that there are reserves dedicated to the soft story retrofit. If you are considering a 5-unit building or above, it's likely that you're going to have 3 stories in San Francisco. That should be part of your underwriting to estimate the retrofit of that building. There are about 1,700 buildings that have been identified in San Francisco as requiring a soft story retrofit or designated as soft story and requiring a retrofit, and about 700 owners out of that 1,700 have completed the process of retrofitting. So for any property type, be sure to look at the 3R report, San Francisco Building and Planning's inspection or permit history, the building owner's original records. Perhaps they did the work without permits a long time ago, or they're halfway to the retrofit requirements. To piggyback off what I was saying about tenancy in common properties, this is another house type that's not for everyone, dependent on your financing and the goals of the other owners in a tenancy in common building. Now, what does tenancy in common mean? It means that you own a percentage of the building, you don't own that individual unit. So if you have a 5-unit building, your ownership percentage in that LLC, in that tenancy in common or that homeowners association, is a percentage relative to the size of your unit. So the idea of tenancy in common was to create more housing within these landlord-owned or investor-owned properties. Well, here's why they can be problematic. One is the financing complexity. Buildings that have formally condoized units, where the units are owned by the individuals and you as an owner don't own a percentage of the TIC, you're eligible for other forms of financing, FHA, conventional, maybe VA, Veterans Affairs or Veterans Association loans. Interest rates, when interest rates were lower overall, could be lower for tenancy in common purchases. Generally speaking, I think it's Merchant Bank, Sterling Bank. There are a couple other designated smaller banks that offer this type of financing. They'll require 15 to 25% down, and interest rates aren't any more competitive than some of the other loan programs available today. Because of the financial complexity and the financing complexity, when you go to resell the unit, there'll be a smaller pool of buyers, hypothetically, that could purchase your ownership in the building than if you were to condoize the entire building. On that note, one of the other complexities of TICs is that you have shared liability. Shared liability for property taxes, shared liability for the reserves, the financial reserves to maintain the exterior of the building and capital improvements. And then of course your insurance liability. So with condos, yes, there is an HOA payment for TICs as well, but for condo associations, the HOA fees are the responsibility of the individual owner, and then that owner can be in default and foreclosed upon by the HOA. Whereas, if the overall property taxes don't get paid on the TIC or their insurance doesn't get paid by the TIC, the other owners are immediately going to have to compensate or make up for the other party's lack of paying. And on the note of shared liability, if everyone in the building could agree to condoization, then they would have to agree to share the the cost of the legal agreements or the legal representation to go through the process of condoization. I believe everyone in the building has to have lived in the tenancy in common building for at least 2 years. So it has to be owner occupied in order to complete the condoization. But if this is the case, condo associations offer, especially in boutique buildings that were once TICs, offer higher resale value than TICs, simpler ownership, easier for folks to comprehend what it means. Yeah, and conventional financing, and for that reason, easier resale. There's a bigger buyer pool that can afford to potentially purchase the condo instead of the TIC. House type number 5, I've touched on this, but this is true for any home in the San Francisco Bay Area, any home anywhere. A lot of folks have sensationalized or seen the romanticization of fix and flip projects or home renovation projects on HGTV. Yes, there are some nightmare stories, but it all works out, right? There's definitely some romanticization of owning a specific property type and wanting to renovate it to your own liking. Oftentimes, folks aren't thinking about, can I afford to stay in my rental if I'm renting somewhere, or manage this project from far away if I'm moving from out of state or out of town? Could I live in a construction environment? Oftentimes, the answer, especially if you're working remotely from home, is probably not. I mean, you could, but it would be very annoying and it could be stressful to your family life. It's not for everyone. So when bringing this type of property up, these are the things that I have in mind. Are anecdotes from individuals that have bought the ugliest house in the best neighborhood. The house type number 6 is a home that's been cosmetically updated, but has undergone no major systems upgrades since it's been built. So maybe the home's been in the same family for decades, so the house is painted, and the staging definitely leaves less to the imagination of the buyer. Absolutely wonderful for the presentation of the house and for the seller and getting the max value. The reason they get the max value is because most buyers are captivated by the aesthetics of a place rather than, oh, the electrical panel's been upgraded. There's no knob and tube in the house. The plumbing has been upgraded in the last 15 years. The roof has been redone. All of these things have become highlighted issues with the emergence of insurance premium issues, but you could still maybe quantify the emotional impact of a pretty house when it comes to the San Francisco Bay Area real estate market. Electrical system replacement in a Victorian home, I mean, it depends if there's lath and plaster. If there are access ways to bring out the knob and tube in between some of the chicken wire of that lath and plaster. If you can cut into it without having to replace the entire lath and plaster with drywall, then it can be cheaper. But you're looking at anywhere from, with panel replacement, removal of knob and tube, replacement with modern Romex, I would say anywhere between 15 and 30 grand for a 1,500 square foot home. When it comes to roof replacement, it depends on the types of shingles as well. There are some Spanish revival homes and Mediterranean style homes that have the tile roofing that lasts longer. Well, first let's talk about shingles. If there are multiple layers to the shingles from over the years of not ripping out the old ones and replacing the plywood underneath, that can be quite pricey. If you have to replace the roof such that you only have a single layer of shingles, that type of job could range anywhere from 22 to 32 grand. The material over flat roofs can be cheaper, but flat roofs might require more maintenance because there's more standing water. Replacing all the plumbing could, in a 1,500 square foot house, could range from 15 to 25 grand. Central heat and air maybe wouldn't be the best environmental or economic choice, but having a central heating system installed when there is none, when you just have these wall heaters, could range anywhere from 15 to 25 grand. So deferred maintenance of these major systems could run you anywhere from 50 to 100 grand. So make sure you budget for this when looking in the home inspection report. Get as many quotes as you can that are San Francisco prices and not just ChatGPT prices. When it comes to dry rotted siding, the cost of heart of redwood is very expensive these days. Hardy siding boards are also pretty expensive. You might buy a home that has that vinyl covering over the original siding. You don't know what's underneath there. So make sure you check out the pest inspection reports for dry rot. If they've looked underneath the vinyl siding or they've drilled for test holes in stucco. If there have been any roof leaks in the past, there are always going to be a higher pest inspection estimate for replacing the framing underneath that stucco when those test holes are made. I would say 99% of the time. You'd be lucky not to find anything unless the owners over the last 100 to 150 years took impeccable care of their roof and their gutter system. It's highly unlikely there's not going to be more issues underneath that stucco. And something I see all the time in the San Francisco Bay Area on the pest inspection report is underneath the front steps. If it's wood, it's more easily accessible, but if it's concrete or other tile work over steps underneath the house and that framing of the stairs, there's going to be dry rot from water infiltrating cracks in those steps in the concrete or the tile over the years, run through that concrete and created a fungus-friendly environment and termite-friendly environment. Not as common, but unreinforced masonry buildings. There's a reason we don't see a ton of historic brick buildings buildings in the city of San Francisco or throughout the Bay Area, and that has to do with seismic risk and the lack of malleability or flexibility when it comes to brick material in high shake environments or scenarios. So there are a lot of brick buildings that were destroyed during the 1906 earthquake. San Francisco has retrofitted over 95% of its unreinforced masonry buildings, but it's still better, as you would do your due diligence with these other property types, make sure you investigate the cost of retrofitting this type of building. In 1992, there was a URM ordinance in San Francisco that required specialized retrofitting of these structures. There are about 2,000 URM unreinforced masonry buildings in San Francisco to this day. Most of them, 95% of them, have been properly retrofitted. So this construction of unreinforced masonry buildings happened between 1850 and 1940. The reason brick is not a sustainable form of building here in brick or stone walls lack internal steel reinforcement, and brick itself as a material is highly susceptible to earthquake damage. Unbraced brick walls extending above the roofline are especially vulnerable to shaking and breaking off during an earthquake. And this is also why you see specific recommendations for brick chimneys either being removed or retrofitted in some way. So San Francisco has some unique challenges that we might not face in other cities with more modern construction, lack of these natural hazards that we've talked about in this video and other videos. It's not about avoiding these properties altogether, but it's about making sure your offer price includes a budget for these improvements that you have to make, the insurance that you have to pay, or a down payment that matches the property type you want to pursue.